The Valdorian Empire's recruitment station hummed with activity as various alien species lined up for military assessment. Commander Zextal, a towering reptilian officer with scales that shimmered purple in the artificial light, reviewed the day's candidates with growing disappointment. The Empire desperately needed warriors for the ongoing border conflicts with the savage Kreth Collective, but most applicants barely met basic physical requirements. Then Marcus Chen walked through the entrance. The human stood barely 6 feet tall, unremarkable compared to the 8-foot Gorvanian berserkers or the armored Thex warriors who had applied earlier. His brown hair was neatly trimmed, his posture relaxed but alert. What caught Zextal's attention wasn't his size, but his eyes, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of fear despite being surrounded by predator species that could tear him apart. Name and species for the record, Zextal's aide, a nervous Filtani clerk, chittered while adjusting his translation device. Marcus Chen. Human. From the Sol system. A collective murmur rippled through the waiting area. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, but not for their military prowess. They were traders, diplomats, explorers. Their homeworld Earth was considered a backwater planet that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago. Most species viewed them as harmless scavengers who survived through cunning rather than strength. Zextal gestured to the combat simulator chamber. Standard protocol, human. You'll face 3 scenarios of increasing difficulty. Survive all 3 and we'll discuss terms. Marcus nodded and entered the chamber without hesitation. The first scenario materialized around him. A dense jungle environment populated with holographic Kreth warriors. These weren't the Empire's current enemies, but historical recordings of actual battles. The Kreth were notorious for their pack-hunting tactics and razor-sharp claws that could slice through most armor. What happened next defied every expectation. Marcus didn't charge forward like the typical warrior applicants. Instead, he melted into the artificial foliage with a fluidity that made Zextal's combat-trained eyes struggle to track him. When the first Kreth pack emerged, they found nothing but empty jungle. Then their leader simply collapsed, its throat opened by an improvised blade fashioned from a sharp rock. The human moved like death itself, striking from shadows and vanishing before retaliation was possible. He used the environment as a weapon, turning the Kreth's pack tactics against them by isolating individuals and eliminating them with surgical precision. Within 12 minutes, 15 holographic Kreth warriors lay motionless in the digital dirt. By the 7 moons, Zextal breathed, his translator barely keeping up with his rapid speech. Run the second scenario immediately. The jungle dissolved, replaced by an urban warfare environment. This time, Marcus faced a full Thex assault squad equipped with energy weapons and tactical armor. The watching aliens expected the human to struggle without stealth advantages. They were wrong. Marcus analyzed the battlefield in seconds, identifying sight lines, cover positions, and structural weaknesses in the holographic buildings. He moved with purpose now, no longer hiding but flowing like water through the urban maze. When a Thex warrior rounded a corner expecting easy prey, Marcus was already gone, having scaled a wall with impossible speed and silence. The human's combat style was unlike anything in the Empire's databases. He didn't rely on superior firepower or armor. Instead, he turned every environmental element into a tactical advantage. A piece of rubble became a distraction. A broken pipe became a club. Even gravity itself seemed to bend to his will as he used falling debris to eliminate enemies below. By the time the simulation ended, 8 heavily armed Thex warriors had been neutralized using nothing but improvised weapons in the human's bare hands. The watching crowd had fallen completely silent. Zextal's aide was frantically checking the simulation equipment. Commander, the system might be malfunctioning. No single warrior has ever completed both scenarios with 0 injuries. Run the third scenario, Zextal ordered, his voice tight with anticipation and growing unease. The final test materialized as the Empire's ultimate challenge, a recreation of the Battle of Corvin Prime, where a single warrior was expected to hold a strategic choke point against waves of enemies until reinforcements arrived. Historical records showed that even the Empire's greatest champions typically lasted only minutes before being overwhelmed. Marcus stood in the center of a narrow canyon pass, surrounded by weapon racks containing various alien armaments. Most warriors would grab the heaviest weapons available and prepare for a glorious last stand. Marcus selected a simple combat knife, and took position near the canyon's narrowest point. The first wave hit like a tsunami of claws, fangs, and energy weapons. 20 enemies charged the pass simultaneously, expecting to overwhelm the lone defender through sheer numbers. What they encountered instead was controlled chaos. The human moved with mechanical precision, never taking an unnecessary step or making a wasted motion. Each movement served multiple purposes: a dodge that positioned him for a counterattack, a strike that eliminated one enemy while using their body to shield against another's weapon. He turned the narrow canyon into a killing field where numbers became a disadvantage rather than an asset. Wave after wave crashed against the human's defense and broke like water against stone. Marcus adapted his tactics constantly, learning enemy patterns and exploiting weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. When conventional weapons broke or ran out of ammunition, he improvised new ones from fallen enemies' equipment and environmental debris. The simulation's timer showed 17 minutes had passed when the final wave was repelled. Marcus stood alone in the canyon, breathing heavily but undefeated. The ground around him was littered with holographic corpses, their number so high that Zextal's aide had stopped counting after 50. Complete silence filled the recruitment station. Every alien present stared at the human warrior, who had just rewritten their understanding of individual combat capability. Marcus emerged from the simulation chamber, his expression unchanged, as if he had just completed a routine training exercise rather than an impossible feat of warfare. Zextal found his voice first. "Human Marcus Chen, by imperial decree you are immediately commissioned as a battle commander in the Valdorian military. Your assignment will be determined by the War Council themselves." Marcus nodded calmly. "When do I start?" As news of the humans' performance spread through the station's communication networks, military officials across the Empire began receiving urgent reports. The humans, it seemed, were not the harmless traitors they appeared to be. And if Marcus Chen was any indication of his species' capabilities, the Valdorian Empire had just discovered either their greatest asset or their most terrifying potential enemy. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after his recruitment, Marcus Chen stood before the Valdorian War Council in the Empire's capital on Nexus Prime. The chamber was a massive dome carved from black volcanic rock, its walls displaying real-time tactical maps of ongoing conflicts across the galaxy. 12 of the Empire's highest-ranking military officials sat in a semicircle, their various alien forms creating an intimidating tableau of claws, scales, and predatory intelligence. Admiral Vossakri, the Empire's supreme military commander, leaned forward from his elevated throne. The ancient Zerak warrior bore scars from 1,000 battles, his cybernetic implants gleaming against gray-scaled skin. "Battle Commander Chen, your performance at the recruitment station has caused quite a stir among our ranks. Some call it impossible. Others suggest our simulation systems are faulty." Marcus stood at attention, his expression neutral. "The simulations functioned perfectly, Admiral. Would you like me to demonstrate again?" A low rumble of laughter echoed from General Throck, a massive Gorvanian whose tusks had been replaced with razor-sharp metal implants. "Cocky for a soft skin? I like that." His amusement faded quickly. "But confidence means nothing in real combat, human. We've seen species talk big before facing actual Kreth." Admiral Voskry raised a clawed hand for silence. "Indeed. Which is why your first assignment will be a practical examination of your abilities. The mining colony on Tertius 7 has gone dark. Our last communication indicated Kreth raiders had breached the perimeter defenses. A full military response would take weeks to organize and deploy." Marcus processed this information quickly. "You want me to conduct a solo reconnaissance mission?" "More than reconnaissance," interjected Commander Yexandra, her insectoid features clicking with anticipation. "The colony contains 300 civilian workers and houses critical rare earth mining operations. If they're still alive, extract them. If the Kreth have established a forward base, eliminate it." The scale of the assignment was staggering. A single warrior against an unknown number of Kreth raiders, with civilian lives hanging in the balance. Most Empire soldiers would request a full battalion for such a mission. Marcus simply nodded. "Understood. When do I depart?" Admiral Vossakri's scarred features shifted into what might have been approval. "Immediately. You'll be provided with standard Empire equipment and a fast reconnaissance ship. The journey to Tertius 7 will take 18 hours. Use that time to familiarize yourself with Kreth tactical patterns and colony layouts. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in the pilot's seat of the sleek reconnaissance vessel Shadowblade, studying holographic displays of his destination. Tertia 7 was a barren world of red rock and deep canyon systems, chosen for mining operations specifically because its harsh environment discouraged settlement. The colony itself was built into a natural canyon formation, with only 2 viable entrance points. The tactical situation was grim. Kreth raiders typically traveled in packs of 20 to 50 warriors, specializing in overwhelming defenses through coordinated attacks. Their natural armor could deflect most energy weapons, and their pack-hunting instincts made them deadly in close combat. Worse, if they had taken the colony intact, they would be using civilian hostages as shields. Marcus spent the journey analyzing every piece of available intelligence. Kreth communication patterns, their clan hierarchy structures, preferred weapons, even their dietary habits. Information was a weapon, and he intended to be fully armed when he arrived. The ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tertia 7 system, its stealth systems immediately engaging. Long-range sensors detected 3 Kreth assault ships in orbit around the planet, confirming the worst-case scenario. This wasn't a simple raiding party. It was a full invasion force. Marcus piloted the Shadowblade through the asteroid field surrounding the planet, using the floating rocks as cover while scanning for detailed intelligence. The Kreth ships showed signs of recent combat damage, suggesting the colony defenders had fought back harder than expected. Several escape pods floated dead in space, their life support systems long since failed. The reconnaissance ship's sensors painted a detailed picture as Marcus approached the planet's surface. The colony's main entrance showed signs of massive explosive damage, with Kreth combat vehicles positioned around the perimeter. Thermal imaging revealed approximately 200 life signs within the colony structures, some clustered in what appeared to be holding areas, others scattered throughout the mining complex. Most concerning was the evidence of construction activity. The Kreth weren't just raiding, they were establishing a permanent base. Heavy machinery was being used to expand tunnel systems and fortify defensive positions. If allowed to complete their work, this forward base would threaten shipping lanes throughout the sector. Marcus landed the Shadowblade in a narrow canyon 5 kilometers from the colony, using the ship's camouflage systems to hide it among the rock formations. He equipped himself with standard Empire gear, adaptive armor that could adjust to environmental conditions, a plasma rifle with extended battery packs, various grenades and explosives, and a tactical knife forged from crystalline metal that could cut through most materials. The journey to the colony took 3 hours of careful movement through treacherous canyon terrain. Marcus used this time to observe Kreth patrol patterns and identify key defensive positions. The raiders had posted sentries at obvious choke points but left gaps in their coverage that could be exploited by someone with proper stealth training. As he crested a ridge overlooking the colony, Marcus got his first direct view of the enemy force. The intelligence estimates had been wrong. There weren't 50 Kreth raiders. There were over 200, with more arriving via dropship every few hours. This was a full-scale military operation disguised as a raiding party. Kreth warriors moved through the colony like ants, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the planet's harsh sunlight. They had indeed taken civilian hostages, with groups of human and alien workers visible behind energy barriers in the colony's central plaza. Kreth engineers were modifying mining equipment for military purposes, while construction crews expanded defensive fortifications. Any rational military assessment would conclude that a single warrior, no matter how skilled, could not possibly overcome such overwhelming numbers. The proper response would be to report back to command and request a full fleet engagement. Marcus checked his equipment one final time and began his descent toward the colony. The first Kreth sentry died, without knowing he was under attack. Marcus struck from above, dropping silently from a rocky overhang to drive his crystalline knife through the creature's neck joint. The body was hidden before the next patrol reached the area. Moving through the colony's outer defenses required patience and precise timing. Marcus used the Kreth's own construction noise to mask his movement, eliminating isolated sentries and guards with methodical efficiency. Each kill was calculated to avoid raising alarms while gathering intelligence on enemy positions and capabilities. By nightfall, 12 Kreth warriors had simply vanished from their posts. Their comrades assumed equipment failures or communication glitches, Never suspecting that death was moving among them with surgical precision, Marcus positioned himself overlooking the main compound, studying the hostage situation through his scope. The civilians were being held in 3 separate groups, with heavy guard details and automated weapon systems covering all approaches. Any direct assault would result in massive casualties among the people he was trying to save. But Marcus hadn't come to conduct a direct assault. He had come to wage war. As the planet's twin moons rose over the canyon walls, casting eerie shadows through the colony's structures, the Kreth guards began to notice that their perimeter was falling silent. Patrol teams failed to report in. Sentry posts went dark. Something was hunting them in the darkness, and they had no idea what they were facing. The Empire's newest battle commander was about to teach the Kreth Collective why humans had survived and thrived in a galaxy full of predators. The lesson would be written in blood and terror, and by morning the survivors would carry a new fear back to their homeworlds. The hunt had begun. The Kreth patrol leader Vextar had survived 43 raids across 12 star systems. His chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, and his pack respected him for his cunning and brutality. But as he crouched beside the empty sentry post where guard brother Klex should have been stationed, a foreign emotion crept into his predator's mind: fear. Still no response from Perimeter Team 7. His Lieutenant Zartul chittered, mandibles clicking nervously. That's 6 positions gone silent in 2 hours. Vextar examined the abandoned post carefully. No signs of struggle, no energy weapon discharge marks, no blood. Klex had simply vanished, leaving behind only his communication device and plasma rifle. The weapon was fully charged and ready to fire, as if it had never been needed. Equipment malfunction, Vextar decided, though his combat instincts screamed otherwise. The mining operations are interfering with communications. Double the patrol strength and maintain constant contact. But even as he gave the orders, Vextar knew something was terribly wrong. In 4 decades of warfare, he had never encountered an enemy that could eliminate trained Kreth warriors without leaving any trace of combat. Their natural armor could deflect most known weapons, and their pack-fighting instincts made surprise attacks nearly impossible. 20 meters above them, Marcus Chen observed the conversation through his scope's translation module. The Kreth were growing nervous, which meant his psychological warfare was working. Fear was a weapon that could defeat enemies long before the first shot was fired. Marcus had spent the night studying Kreth behavioral patterns through direct observation. They were pack hunters by evolution, dependent on constant communication and mutual support. Isolate them, break their communication network, and their effectiveness dropped dramatically. They became prey animals in predator bodies. The human warrior moved silently along the canyon rim, tracking the reinforced patrol as it made its way toward the next checkpoint. 12 Kreth warriors moving in perfect formation, weapons ready, scanning for threats they couldn't comprehend. They expected to face mining equipment turned into improvised weapons, or desperate civilians making futile resistance efforts. They weren't prepared for a predator that had evolved on a world where humans were originally prey animals who survived by becoming the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy. Marcus descended the canyon, while using climbing equipment that made no sound against the rock face. His adaptive armor shifted color to match the red stone, rendering him nearly invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. The Kreth patrol passed directly beneath him, their attention focused on ground-level threats. The last warrior in formation felt a brief pressure against his neck before unconsciousness claimed him. Marcus caught the falling body, preventing any noise that might alert the others. 11 warriors continued their patrol, unaware that their pack had just been reduced. 5 minutes later, the warrior on point duty simply vanished between one step and the next. His weapon clattered to the ground, but by the time his pack brothers reached the spot, there was nothing but empty canyon and the sound of wind through stone. Panic began to set in. Kreth warriors were not easily frightened, but an enemy they couldn't see or hear was attacking their most fundamental survival instincts. The patrol leader ordered his remaining troops into a defensive circle, weapons pointing outward, as they called for emergency extraction. Marcus watched them from a concealed position 50 meters away, analyzing their defensive formation through his scope. The Kreth had adopted a textbook response to invisible threats, creating overlapping fields of fire that should have prevented any approach. It was tactically sound but psychologically devastating, because it acknowledged that they were no longer the hunters. The human warrior didn't attack the defensive position. Instead, he activated a small device that emitted subsonic frequencies, designed to interfere with Kreth communication implants. The defensive circle's coordination began to break down as warriors lost contact with each other despite being only meters apart. Confusion turned to terror as individual warriors found themselves isolated within the group. Their natural pack-hunting instincts demanded constant communication, but the subsonic interference made their voices sound distorted and alien. Each Kreth began to suspect that the others might not be pack brothers at all, but shape-shifting enemies wearing familiar forms. When the circle finally collapsed into chaos, Marcus struck. He moved through the confused warriors like a ghost, using their disrupted senses against them. A touch here disabled a weapon, a precise strike there severed communication implants. Bodies dropped silently as the human applied techniques learned from studying dozens of alien anatomies during his journey to Tertius 7. The entire engagement lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, 11 elite Kreth warriors lay unconscious in the canyon dirt, their weapons scattered and their pride shattered. Marcus left them alive deliberately. Traumatized survivors would spread more fear than corpses. By sunrise, reports of the ghost attacks had reached every Kreth position in the colony. Commander Grixnall, the expedition leader, called an emergency meeting of his pack leaders in the fortified central compound. The massive Kreth warrior had led 3 successful planetary invasions, but the overnight losses defied his understanding of warfare. 47 warriors eliminated or missing, his intelligence officer reported. No bodies recovered, no evidence of conventional weapons use. Some survivors report attacks by invisible enemies. Others claim their own pack brothers turned against them. Grixnall slammed a clawed fist against the tactical display. Impossible. Our intelligence confirmed only civilian mining personnel on this planet. There are no military installations, no trained defenders. Perhaps the civilians have military training we didn't detect, suggested pack leader Vextar, whose own patrol had been decimated. Some species maintain citizen militias. Citizen militias don't eliminate Kreth assault teams without leaving evidence, Grixnall snarled. This is coordinated psychological warfare by a professional military force. But where are they hiding? The answer to that question was watching their meeting through a surveillance device Marcus had planted during his nighttime reconnaissance. The human warrior studied the Kreth command structure through the hidden camera, noting defensive positions, guard rotations, and most importantly, the location of the hostage-holding areas. 300 civilian workers were being held in separate compounds throughout the colony, with each group guarded by a full Kreth assault team. Energy barriers prevented escape, while automated weapon systems would eliminate any rescue attempt. The Kreth had learned from previous conflicts that hostages were their most effective protection against Empire military responses. Marcus updated his tactical assessment based on the intelligence gathered. Direct assault was still impossible without massive civilian casualties. But he wasn't planning a direct assault. He was planning something far more devastating to Kreth morale and effectiveness. The human warrior activated his communication system and sent a coded message to the Shadowblade's automated systems. Phase 1 was complete. The Kreth leadership was destabilized, their forces demoralized, and their defensive positions mapped. Now it was time to escalate the psychological warfare into something that would haunt Kreth nightmares for generations. As the planet's harsh sun climbed toward its zenith, Commander Grixnall ordered all patrols to cease and all warriors to maintain defensive positions around critical installations. It was a tactically sound decision that acknowledged the invisible enemy's superiority in mobile warfare. It was also exactly what Marcus had been waiting for. Static defenses could be studied, analyzed, and systematically dismantled. The Kreth had just transformed themselves from hunters into targets. Phase 2 would begin at nightfall, and by morning, the survivors would understand why humans had earned their place among the galaxy's apex predators. The mining colony of Tertius 7 was about to become a legend whispered in fear throughout Kreth space. A cautionary tale about the species that looked harmless but killed like vengeful gods. The ghost in the shadows was about to become something far worse than invisible. He was about to become inevitable. Commander Grixnall had not slept in 36 hours. The Kreth warrior stood in the colony's command center, his four arms manipulating multiple tactical displays, while his compound eyes monitored every defensive position simultaneously. Around him, his remaining officers maintained vigilant watch over their consolidated forces, but the atmosphere reeked of fear scent that no amount of combat stimulants could mask. The invisible enemy had struck 3 more times during the day. Each attack was different, unpredictable, impossible to counter. A sniper's bullet through reinforced armor that should have been impenetrable. An explosion that collapsed a tunnel with surgical precision, trapping an entire squad without killing them. Guard posts found empty with no signs of struggle, as if the warriors had simply decided to abandon their duties and vanish into the desert. "Status report," Grixenol commanded, his voice carrying the forced authority of a leader whose confidence was cracking. Pack leader Zartul consulted his tactical pad with trembling claws. "We've lost 83 warriors in 24 hours. Morale is collapsing among the survivors. Some are requesting immediate evacuation." Evacuation? The word emerged as a hiss of outrage. "We are Kreth. We do not flee from shadows and rumors." But even as he spoke, Grixenol felt the doubt gnawing at his warrior's pride. In 4 decades of conquest, he had never faced an enemy like this. The attacks showed intimate knowledge of Kreth physiology, tactics, and psychology. Whoever was hunting them understood their species better than they understood themselves. High above the command center, Marcus Chen moved through the colony's ventilation system with practiced silence. The human warrior had spent the afternoon installing surveillance devices throughout the Kreth stronghold, mapping every defensive position and identifying critical vulnerabilities. The air ducts were too small for Kreth warriors but perfectly sized for human infiltration. Marcus paused at a junction where multiple air shafts converged, consulting the building schematics he had memorized. 3 levels below, the largest group of civilian hostages was being held in what had once been the colony's main cafeteria. 57 workers from 12 different species guarded by an elite Kreth assault team equipped with the finest military equipment the collective could provide. The conventional approach would be impossible. The cafeteria had only 2 entrances, both covered by overlapping fields of fire and automated defense systems. Energy barriers prevented any escape routes, while motion sensors would detect any approach. The Kreth had turned the room into a perfect kill zone, where any rescue attempt would result in massive civilian casualties. Marcus wasn't planning a conventional approach. The human warrior activated a device that looked like a standard mining tool but had been modified with components from his reconnaissance ship. Molecular acid began eating through the reinforced metal of the air duct directly above the hostage area, creating a hole just large enough for Marcus to observe the situation below. The hostages sat in orderly rows, their heads down in submission. Marcus recognized the signs of prolonged psychological conditioning. The Kreth had been using their natural predator presence to break the prisoner's will to resist. Several showed signs of physical abuse, while others appeared to be suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition. 8 Kreth guards maintained constant surveillance from elevated positions around the room's perimeter. Their weapons were trained on the hostages rather than potential entry points, making their priorities clear. Any rescue attempt would trigger a massacre designed to discourage further interference. Marcus withdrew from the observation point and continued through the ventilation system toward his primary target. The colony's power distribution center was located 2 levels below the command center, protected by redundant security systems and defended by the Kreth's most experienced warriors. If he could reach it undetected, the entire facility would be plunged into darkness, disrupting defensive systems and creating the chaos needed for hostage extraction. The infiltration took 2 hours of careful movement through increasingly narrow passages. Marcus had to disassemble and reassemble some of his equipment to fit through choke points designed to prevent exactly this kind of penetration. The Kreth builders had been thorough, but they had designed their defenses against known threats, not against a species whose military doctrine emphasized adaptation and innovation. The power center was a massive chamber filled with fusion, reactors and distribution networks that supplied energy to the entire mining operation. 6 Kreth engineers maintained the equipment while 12 elite guards watched every entrance. Motion sensors, thermal detectors, and acoustic analyzers created overlapping detection fields that should have made invisible approach Impossible. Marcus spent 20 minutes studying the facility from his concealed position in the ventilation system. The guards were experienced professionals who maintained proper defensive positions and followed protocol precisely. Their equipment was state-of-the-art, their training evident in every movement and gesture. They were also creatures of habit who had never encountered human tactical flexibility. Marcus began by introducing trace amounts of modified atmosphere into the ventilation system. The compounds were harmless to most species but specifically targeted Kreth sensory organs, gradually reducing their ability to detect subtle changes in their environment. Within an hour, the guards' alertness began to deteriorate as their enhanced senses became unreliable. Next, he activated a series of small devices planted throughout the facility during his afternoon reconnaissance. Each device emitted electromagnetic pulses at frequencies that interfered with Kreth cybernetic implants. The guards began experiencing communication glitches and sensor malfunctions that they attributed to equipment problems rather than deliberate sabotage. By the time Marcus dropped silently into the power center through a maintenance shaft, the Kreth defenders were isolated, confused, and operating with compromised senses. They never saw him coming. The engagement was swift and silent. Marcus moved through the chamber like liquid death, using the massive machinery as cover while eliminating guards with clinical precision. Each strike was calculated to disable rather than kill, leaving unconscious warriors who would wake with fragmented memories of an impossible assault. The engineers offered no resistance as Marcus secured the power distribution controls. They were technicians, not warriors, and their survival instincts overrode any thoughts of heroic sacrifice. Marcus secured them with restraints that would keep them unconscious but unharmed for several hours. With the power center under his control, Marcus began the delicate process of selectively disrupting colony systems. Life support remained stable to protect the hostages, but security networks, communication systems, and defensive weapons began failing throughout the facility. To the Kreth defenders, it appeared as if their own technology was turning against them. Commander Grixnall stared at his tactical displays in growing horror as red warning indicators spread across every system readout. "What is happening to our equipment?" "Unknown, Commander," his technical officer reported. "The power systems show normal function, but secondary networks are failing throughout the colony. It's as if someone has intimate knowledge of our technical specifications." The truth was worse than the Kreth commander could imagine. Marcus hadn't just studied their technology during his infiltration, he had improved it. Subtle modifications to power distribution patterns were causing cascade failures in systems that relied on precise energy inputs. Equipment that had functioned perfectly for months was suddenly developing critical malfunctions. As darkness spread through sections of the colony, Marcus emerged from the power center and began Phase 3 of his rescue operation. The hostage areas were now operating on emergency power, their defensive systems compromised, their guards struggling with malfunctioning equipment. It was time to extract the civilians. The human warrior moved through the darkened corridors like a force of nature, eliminating isolated guards and disabling security checkpoints with methodical efficiency. Each rescue would be a precisely orchestrated operation, designed to minimize civilian casualties, while maximizing psychological impact on the remaining Kreth forces. By morning, Commander Grixnall would face a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life: retreat in defeat from a single enemy, or continue a battle that was destroying his forces one warrior at a time. Either decision would mark the beginning of a new legend in galactic military history. The humans had announced their arrival as a military power, and the announcement was written in the fear and confusion of an enemy that had thought itself unbeatable. Marcus Chen was no longer just hunting Kreth warriors. He was hunting their confidence, their pride, and their belief in their own superiority. The apex predators of the galaxy were about to learn that they had never truly been alone at the top of the food chain. The first hostage rescue began at 347 hours local time. Marcus moved through the darkened corridors of Sublevel 3, where 32 civilian workers were being held in what had once been the colony's equipment storage bay. The Kreth had chosen the location specifically because it had only one entrance and thick walls that would contain any explosive rescue attempts they hadn't anticipated. Someone who would come through the floor. Marcus had spent 2 hours carefully cutting through reinforced metal plating using molecular acid, creating an opening just large enough for human passage. The hostages sat in organized rows below, their guards positioned to watch the single door rather than scan overhead for impossible infiltrations. 6 Kreth warriors maintained watch over the prisoners, their weapons trained on the civilian population rather than defensive positions. It was tactically sound but morally reprehensible, ensuring that any rescue attempt would trigger massive casualties among the people being saved. Marcus descended silently into the storage bay, his adaptive armor rendering him nearly invisible in the emergency lighting. The hostages showed signs of prolonged stress and abuse, but most appeared physically capable of movement. Several were medical personnel who had been treating injuries among their fellow prisoners using improvised supplies. The human warrior positioned himself behind the largest guard, studying the Kreth's movement patterns for several minutes before striking. The alien never felt the neural disruptor that rendered him unconscious, his massive form slumping forward without alerting his companions. Marcus caught the falling body and lowered it silently to the floor. 5 guards remaining. The second elimination required more patience. Marcus waited for the guard's regular patrol route to bring him near a bank of disabled equipment, then struck from concealment. Another neural disruptor, another silent collapse, another unconscious warrior who would wake with no memory of how he had been defeated. 4 guards remaining. The third guard proved more challenging. His position offered clear sightlines to most of the storage bay, making direct approach impossible. Marcus solved the problem by activating a small device that emitted ultrasonic frequencies designed to interfere with Kreth balance organs. The guard began experiencing vertigo, attributing it to equipment malfunction rather than deliberate attack. When he moved to a more stable position, Marcus was waiting. 3 guards remaining. The 4th and 5th guards were eliminated simultaneously using a technique Marcus had developed during his study of Kreth physiology. A precisely thrown object struck a pressure plate, creating a brief distraction that allowed the human to move between both warriors and disable them before either could react. Their weapons clattered to the floor as their unconscious forms joined their companions. 1 guard remaining. The final Kreth warrior was the most experienced, a veteran who had survived multiple combat deployments by maintaining constant vigilance. He noticed his comrade's absence within seconds of the last elimination, raising his weapon and shouting warnings that no one could hear due to Marcus's communication jamming. Marcus approached from the one direction the guard couldn't cover while maintaining watch over the hostages. The veteran warrior spun toward the movement, his weapon tracking toward the human's position. For a moment, predator faced predator in the darkness of the storage bay. The Kreth fired first, his plasma bolt scorching the air where Marcus had been standing. But the human was already moving, rolling behind cover while the alien warrior's enhanced reflexes struggled to track his impossible speed. Marcus emerged from concealment at an angle the guard couldn't anticipate, neural disruptor striking precisely between armor plates. The veteran warrior collapsed, his weapon falling silent. Marcus caught the plasma rifle before it could clatter against the floor and alert distant patrols. All guards neutralized. 0 casualties. Stay calm and stay quiet, Marcus whispered to the hostages, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I'm with the Valdorian Empire. We're getting you out of here. The rescue operation that followed was a masterpiece of logistics under pressure. Marcus had prepared escape routes through the colony's service tunnels, mapping paths that avoided Kreth patrol areas and defensive positions. The 32 civilians moved in small groups, guided by hand signals and whispered instructions as they navigated through corridors that had become a battlefield. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the colony's chief medical officer, stayed close to Marcus as they helped injured workers through a particularly narrow passage. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "There are hundreds of Kreth warriors in this facility. How can one person—" "Training, preparation, and the element of surprise," Marcus replied, checking his tactical display for patrol movements. "The Kreth are excellent warriors, but they're predictable. They fight the same way against every enemy. Humans adapt." The first group of hostages reached the extraction point without incident. Marcus had converted an abandoned mining shaft into a temporary safe house, complete with supplies and communication equipment. The civilians would wait there while he rescued the remaining groups, hidden behind camouflage that would fool Kreth sensors. "Contact the Valdorian fleet," Marcus instructed Dr. Mitchell, handing her a military communicator. Tell them Battle Commander Chen requests immediate evacuation support for civilian personnel. Use emergency frequency 77 Alpha. The second rescue operation targeted the largest hostage group in the cafeteria. 57 workers guarded by elite Kreth assault troops in a facility designed to be impregnable. Marcus approached the problem from an angle that defied conventional military thinking. Instead of attacking the guards, he attacked their psychology. The human warrior had spent hours studying Kreth pack behavior through hidden surveillance devices. Elite warriors were confident, disciplined, and experienced in combat against known enemy types. But they were also creatures of instinct, who relied on predictable threat patterns to maintain tactical superiority. Marcus introduced chaos into their environment. He began by manipulating the cafeteria's environmental systems. Temperature fluctuations triggered Kreth stress responses. Subtle changes in air pressure affected their breathing patterns. Electromagnetic interference disrupted their communication implants, creating isolation anxiety among warriors who depended on pack coordination. The guards became increasingly agitated as their environment turned hostile in ways they couldn't identify or counter. Their training demanded they maintain defensive positions, but their instincts screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with their situation. When Marcus finally struck, the elite warriors were already psychologically compromised. He dropped into the cafeteria through a concealed ceiling panel, moving through the confused guards like a phantom. Each strike targeted specific nerve clusters that would disable without killing, leaving unconscious warriors who would recover with no permanent damage. 8 elite guards eliminated in 43 seconds. 0 civilian casualties. The hostage extraction proceeded with clockwork precision. Marcus had prepared multiple escape routes, contingency plans for injured personnel, and rally points where civilians could regroup if separated. The 57 workers moved through the colony's service areas like ghosts, guided by someone who knew every passage and hidden route. The third and final rescue operation was the most dangerous. 24 hostages were being held in the colony's command level, directly adjacent to Commander Grixnall's headquarters. The guards were the Kreth's most experienced warriors, and the facility's defensive systems remained partially operational despite Marcus's sabotage efforts. Marcus approached this final challenge with the patience of a master tactician. He spent 2 hours observing guard rotations, mapping sensor coverage, and identifying the single moment of vulnerability that would allow hostage extraction without triggering a massacre. The opportunity came during a shift change, when guard positions overlapped and communication protocols created a brief window of confusion. Marcus moved through the command level like controlled lightning, eliminating sentries and disabling security systems with surgical precision. The final guard commander was a Kreth veteran named Vostal, who had survived 6 major planetary invasions. He noticed the silence spreading through his area and activated emergency protocols, sealing the hostage area and preparing for a final defensive action. Marcus found him barricaded behind improvised fortifications, weapon-trained on the civilian workers who cowered against the far wall. The Kreth warrior's compound eyes tracked every shadow, his enhanced reflexes ready to respond to any threat with lethal force. "I know you're here, invisible enemy," Vostal called out in heavily accented galactic standard. "Come face me like a warrior, not a coward who strikes from shadows." Marcus emerged from concealment slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons. The Kreth commander's eyes widened as he got his first clear look at the enemy who had been systematically destroying his forces. "Human," Vostal breathed, his weapon wavering slightly. "Impossible. Intelligence reports indicated no military presence on this world." "Intelligence was wrong," Marcus replied calmly. "Stand down, Commander. Your warriors are unconscious, not dead. They'll recover. But if you harm these civilians, you won't walk away from this room." The Kreth veteran studied his human opponent with the respect one apex predator gives another. "You are alone. I have 24 hostages and superior firepower. Surrender, and I will guarantee your warriors' treatment according to military protocols." Marcus smiled, and something in that expression made the veteran Kreth warrior take an involuntary step backward. "I'm not surrendering, Commander. I'm giving you one chance to live through this encounter." The standoff lasted 30 seconds that felt like hours. 2 warriors from different species, different evolutionary paths, different military traditions, measuring each other's resolve and capability. Finally, Commander Vostell lowered his weapon. "You have earned victory through superior tactics and personal courage," the Kreeth veteran said formally. "I yield the field." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Your warriors will be released when civilian evacuation is complete." "You fought with honor, Commander." 24 hours after arriving at Tertius 7, Marcus Chen stood in the colony's landing bay watching Valdorian evacuation ships load the last civilian refugees. 113 workers had been rescued without a single casualty. The Kreeth invasion force had been neutralized without killing a single enemy warrior. Commander Grixnell approached under a flag of truce, his massive form moving with the careful dignity of a defeated but unbroken leader. "Human Marcus Chen," he said formally, "you have demonstrated superior warrior capabilities. My forces withdraw from this system, and I will carry word of your prowess to the collective leadership." Marcus saluted in the Kreeth military fashion he had learned during his intelligence preparation. "Commander Grixnell, your warriors fought with courage. They will be released as promised." As the Kreeth ships departed into hyperspace, Admiral Voskree's holographic image materialized in the landing bay. "Battle Commander Chen, initial reports suggest you achieved complete mission success with minimal resources. The War Council is impressed." Marcus looked up at the stars where Kreeth ships were disappearing into the void, carrying stories that would transform humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. "The mission is complete, Admiral. Requesting permission to return to base for debriefing." "Permission granted." "And Commander, welcome to the Valdorian Empire. I believe we're going to accomplish great things together." The reconnaissance ship Shadowblade lifted off from Tertius 7, carrying a human warrior whose actions had just rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy. Word would spread through both Empire and enemy territories about the species that looked harmless, but fought like vengeful gods. Humanity had announced its arrival as a military force to be reckoned with, and the announcement echoed through the stars like thunder. 6 months after the Tertius 7 incident, the name Marcus Chen had become legend throughout the galaxy. In Kreeth space, mothers frightened unruly children with whispered tales of the ghost warrior, who could strike without warning and vanish without trace. In Valdorian territory, military academies studied his tactics as examples of impossible combat achievements. Across neutral systems, traders spoke in hushed tones about the human who had single-handedly redefined the balance of galactic power. Marcus himself remained largely unaware of his growing reputation. He stood in the War Council chamber on Nexus Prime, receiving his latest assignment from Admiral Vossacree, while staff officers observed from the gallery. Word had spread through military channels that witnessing a Chen briefing was considered essential professional development for aspiring commanders. "The situation is unprecedented," Admiral Voskreee explained, his scarred features grave with concern. "The hegemony of Zephyr has declared war on 3 member worlds simultaneously. Their fleets are larger than our current deployment capabilities, and their ground forces outnumber our available troops by 4 to 1. Marcus studied the tactical hologram floating above the council table. The hegemony controlled a cluster of resource-rich systems that had remained neutral throughout previous galactic conflicts. Their sudden aggression suggested either desperation or the confidence that came from superior military capability. "Intelligence assessment?" Marcus asked, noting defensive positions and fleet movements with professional interest. General Throck leaned forward, his massive tusks gleaming under the chamber's lights. "Unknown technology, human. Their ships show energy signatures we've never encountered, and their ground forces are equipped with armor that deflects our standard weapons. 3 of our scout fleets have been destroyed with minimal hegemony losses." Commander Yexandra's insectoid features clicked with agitation. "Worse, they seem to know our tactical doctrine intimately. Every strategy we've employed has been countered before implementation. It's as if they have access to our military planning databases." Marcus processed this information while studying ship configurations and deployment patterns. The hegemony forces moved with the coordination that suggested either extensive battle experience or advanced tactical planning systems. Their willingness to engage multiple targets simultaneously indicated confidence in their ability to handle superior numbers. "Request permission to conduct reconnaissance of hegemony capabilities," Marcus said finally. "Standard intelligence gathering appears insufficient for tactical assessment." Admiral Vossacree's compound eyes focused intently on the human commander. Clarify your operational parameters, Battle Commander. Deep infiltration of hegemony territory. Direct observation of their technology and tactical capabilities. Assessment of leadership structure and strategic objectives. Marcus paused. Solo mission profile. The War Council erupted in concerned chatter. Several officers began speaking simultaneously, their translated voices creating a cacophony of doubt and objection. General Throck's booming laughter cut through the noise. The human wants to spy on an entire star nation by himself. I approve of the boldness, but even Chen cannot infiltrate enemy home systems undetected. Marcus waited for silence before responding. With respect, General, the Kreth thought their colony was unassailable. The hegemony will have similar blind spots in their security. Every military force does. Admiral Vossakri raised a clawed hand for order. The risks are considerable, Commander. If captured, you would be tortured for intelligence on Empire capabilities. If killed, we lose our most effective strategic asset. If simply detected, the hegemony gains knowledge of our reconnaissance capabilities. Acknowledged, Admiral. But conventional intelligence gathering has failed to provide actionable information. The Empire needs to understand what we're facing before committing to full-scale warfare. The debate continued for 2 hours, with council members arguing the merits and dangers of Marcus's proposed mission. Finally, Admiral Vossakri called for a formal vote. The decision was unanimous. Operation Deep Look was authorized. 3 days later, Marcus piloted a heavily modified stealth ship through the outer edges of hegemony space. The vessel appeared to be a standard cargo hauler on sensor sweeps, but concealed advanced surveillance equipment and defensive systems designed by the Empire's finest engineers. If detected, the ship would automatically self-destruct to prevent technology recovery. The journey to the hegemony capital system took 18 days of careful navigation through heavily patrolled space. Marcus used asteroid fields and stellar phenomena as cover, monitoring enemy communications and studying patrol patterns during the voyage. What he discovered was both impressive and troubling. The hegemony military showed discipline and coordination that exceeded most galactic powers. Their communication protocols were sophisticated, their technology integration seamless, and their strategic planning methodical. This was not a newly aggressive species stumbling into warfare, but an established military power, revealing capabilities they had previously kept hidden. The capital world of Zephyr Prime orbited a binary star system that provided natural protection against surprise attacks. Massive orbital platforms created overlapping defensive fields, while patrol fleets maintained constant coverage of all approach vectors. The planet itself was a fortress world where every structure served dual civilian and military purposes. Marcus established a hidden base on an uninhabited moon in the system's outer reaches, using the cargo ship's advanced fabrication systems to create long-term survival equipment. From this concealed position, he began systematic observation of hegemony operations using surveillance drones that could approach closer to populated areas. What he found changed everything. The hegemony wasn't just technologically advanced. They were using captured Valdorian equipment and personnel to enhance their capabilities. Energy signatures that had seemed alien were actually modified Empire technology, improved beyond original specifications, and integrated with hegemony systems. The defensive armor that deflected, standard weapons incorporated materials and designs stolen from Empire research facilities. More disturbing was the discovery of Valdorian officers among hegemony command staff. These weren't prisoners of war, but willing collaborators who had provided tactical intelligence and strategic planning expertise. The hegemony's knowledge of Empire doctrine came from traitors within the military itself. Marcus spent 3 weeks documenting evidence of the collaboration, recording conversations and gathering technical specifications that proved beyond doubt that the hegemony possessed classified information. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, involving dozens of high-ranking officers and multiple research installations. But the most shocking discovery came during surveillance of a secret hegemony facility on Zephyr Prime's northern continent. The underground complex was manufacturing weapons specifically designed to counter human combat techniques. Energy dampeners that would neutralize neural disruptors, sonic generators tuned to human hearing frequencies, armor configurations that protected against the precise strikes Marcus had used so effectively against the Kreth. The hegemony wasn't just planning to fight the Valdorian Empire. They were planning to fight Marcus Chen specifically. The facility's security was formidable, but Marcus had learned to view impossible defenses as interesting challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. He infiltrated the complex during a shift change, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance passages that hegemony engineers had considered too small for practical intrusion. What he found in the facility's central laboratory validated his worst fears. Detailed holographic recordings of his actions at Tertius 7 played on multiple displays, analyzed frame by hegemony tactical specialists. Computer simulations tested various countermeasures against human combat techniques, while weapons technicians refined designs specifically intended to neutralize Marcus's advantages. The lead researcher was a being Marcus recognized from intelligence files, Dr. Vex Thulin, a brilliant military scientist who had disappeared from Empire territory 6 months earlier. The alien's betrayal of his former colleagues was as complete as it was devastating. The human's psychological warfare techniques are his greatest strength, Dr. Vex Thulin explained to his assembled team. Eliminate his ability to instill fear, and he becomes merely another skilled warrior rather than a force multiplier. Marcus recorded everything, gathering evidence that would expose the full scope of hegemony preparations. But as he prepared to withdraw, an opportunity presented itself that was too valuable to ignore. Dr. Vex Thulin's research represented years of work and contained detailed plans for the upcoming offensive against Empire worlds. The data theft required 6 hours of careful work with advanced encryption, systems, and security protocols. Marcus downloaded terabytes of information while simultaneously planting false data that would mislead hegemony planning efforts. When he finally withdrew from the facility, he carried intelligence that would reshape the entire conflict.